The first time my friend's mom told me, "This stays between us," nothing had happened yet. That was probably the part I kept remembering. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind that seemed determined to be forgettable. I had stopped at a small neighborhood cafe after work, mostly because my apartment felt too quiet and I didn't want to go home yet. I ordered black coffee, took the corner table, and spent 10 minutes staring at a message I wasn't going to send. "You around?" I deleted it. Then I opened the same conversation again. Some habits are easier to repeat than explain. I was 24, old enough to know when I was lonely and still young enough to pretend I wasn't. Most evenings, I filled the silence with videos, half-finished books, or pointless trips to the grocery store just to hear another human voice. That afternoon, I noticed someone sitting near the window. I knew her immediately. Marion, my best friend Daniel's mother. She was 47, wearing a simple cream sweater and reading something on her phone. Her hair was loosely tied back, and she had the same calm expression I remembered from Daniel's house, like she was always listening to something other people couldn't hear. She looked up. For half a second, neither of us said anything. Then she smiled. "You." I laughed quietly, apparently. She glanced at my coffee. Still black. I looked at the cup, then at her. "You remember that? You used to drink it at our house." "Right." She gave a small nod, as if that explained everything. It shouldn't have mattered. It did. She joined me a few minutes later, carrying her tea with both hands. We talked about ordinary things, Daniel's terrible habit of leaving dishes in the sink, the cafe's broken heater, the rain that hadn't arrived despite the forecast. Nothing important. And somehow, I noticed everything. The way she folded the edge of her napkin into a smaller square while listening. The brief pause before she answered certain questions. The way her eyes stayed on mine just a little longer than necessary before moving toward the window. At one point, she laughed at something I said. Not politely. Really laughed. Then she covered her mouth and shook her head. "You've changed," she said. I wasn't sure what she meant. "Good changed." She smiled. "I haven't decided." That stayed with me longer than it should have. When we finally left, the sidewalk was damp from a light rain. We stood outside the cafe beneath the narrow awning, neither of us immediately walking away. "You should come by sometime," she said. "Daniel's." She hesitated. "Number home." I looked at her. She seemed to realize how that sounded. "I mean, Daniel's out most evenings anyway. If you're nearby, just stop in. Make yourself at home." I smiled because I didn't know what else to do. "Okay." She nodded, then turned toward her car. I watched her leave. I told myself it was nothing. A few hours later, my phone buzzed. Her name was on the screen. I stared at the message for almost a minute before opening it. "Daniel doesn't need to know we talked today." A second message appeared before I could decide what to think. "This stays between us." I read it twice. Then a third message came through. "And if you come over tomorrow, come alone." That was the moment I realized "make yourself at home" had never been as innocent as it sounded. The next evening, I almost didn't go. I stood outside my apartment for a few minutes with my keys in my hand, telling myself I was only being ridiculous. She was Daniel's mother. I had known her for years. She had watched me grow from an awkward teenager into someone who still didn't know what to do with his hands when a woman looked at him too long. There was nothing strange about visiting. Except she had told me to come alone. I drove there anyway. Marion opened the door before I knocked twice. "You came." I said I would. "I know." She stepped aside. The house looked exactly the same as I remembered, but somehow different without Daniel's noise filling it. His shoes weren't by the door. His jacket wasn't hanging over the chair. "You sure he's not coming back?" I asked. "He's staying with his girlfriend tonight." She said it casually. I nodded. Neither of us mentioned the message. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and tea. She put 2 mugs on the table and sat opposite me. For a while, we talked about nothing. Then she looked at my phone. You always waiting for someone to text? I glanced down. No. She raised an eyebrow. That's a very quick no. I laughed. Maybe. She smiled but didn't push. After a minute, she said, I used to do that. Wait for texts. Wait for people to make me feel less alone. The words came out quietly. She looked toward the window. I was married for 19 years, she said. After the divorce, the house felt enormous. I didn't know what to say. So I didn't say anything. She seemed grateful for that. My friends kept telling me I should date again. Did you? A little. And? She shrugged. They were nice men. That sounds dangerous. She laughed softly. Exactly. I smiled. Then the room went quiet again. I looked at her hands around the mug. She noticed. What? Nothing. You're starring. I know. She didn't move her hands. That should have been my warning. Instead, I stayed. The problem wasn't that I suddenly wanted something from her. It was that I had started noticing how easy it was to be around her. That scared me more. Because there were rules I hadn't written down, but somehow knew by heart. She was older. She was Daniel's mother. And whatever I was beginning to imagine had no safe place to exist. When I stood to leave, she walked me to the door. Thanks for coming, she said. Thanks for the tea. She smiled. You always say thank you too many times. I've been told. She reached out and brushed a tiny piece of lint from my jacket. Neither of us spoke. Her hand stayed there for 1 second longer than necessary. Then she pulled it away. Good night. Good night. I walked toward my car without looking back. I made it halfway down the driveway before I did. She was still standing in the doorway. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because, for once, someone wasn't asking me to explain why I was lonely. She had simply noticed. After that night, Marian changed the routine. She stopped texting first. Stopped leaving the porch light on when she knew I might be coming by. Even at Daniel's house, she found reasons to stay busy whenever I was there. I noticed. Of course I noticed. Daniel didn't. He was too busy complaining about his job and showing me pictures of a car he couldn't afford. I nodded at the right moments. Across the room, Marian folded laundry. She didn't look at me once. That somehow made it worse. A week passed. Then another. I told myself the distance was sensible. It was probably what both of us needed. So why did I keep checking my phone? One Friday evening, Daniel asked if I wanted to stay for dinner. I almost said no. Then Marian appeared from the kitchen, carrying a bowl of salad. Stay, she said. Just one word. Daniel looked between us. You guys okay? Marian set the bowl down. Why wouldn't we be? Daniel shrugged. You've both been acting weird. My stomach tightened. Marian reached for the serving spoon. I've been busy. Busy doing what? Being your mother. Daniel laughed. Fair. I laughed too, but it came out wrong. Too quick. Later, while Daniel was outside taking a phone call, I went into the kitchen for water. Marian was standing at the counter. She didn't turn around. You shouldn't have stayed. I was invited. You know what I mean. I put the glass down. Did I do something? She finally looked at me. No. Then why are you avoiding me? Her eyes dropped to the counter. I thought it would be easier. For who? She didn't answer. The refrigerator hummed behind us. I could hear Daniel talking outside. his voice muffled through the glass door. Marian rubbed her thumb along the edge of the counter. "You're young. I know. And Daniel is your friend. I know. You're supposed to come here and talk about cars and work and stupid things. I do." She looked at me. "Not anymore." The words were barely audible. I stepped closer. Not much. Just enough to make the space between us feel different. She didn't step back. "Marian, don't." I stopped. Her eyes lifted to mine. There was something there she seemed determined to hide. I waited. She swallowed. "I don't know what you think this is." "I don't know either." That made her look away. For a second, I thought she might smile. Instead, she whispered, "That's the problem." Footsteps sounded outside. We both moved at once. She picked up the dish towel. I reached for my glass. Daniel walked in. "Everything okay?" "Fine," Marian said. I nodded. "Yeah." Daniel looked at us for a second longer than necessary. Then his phone rang again. He stepped back outside. Marian exhaled. I looked at her. She looked at me. Neither of us moved. Then she came closer, slowly enough that I could have stepped away. Her hand rose, almost touching my face. She stopped. "Go home," she whispered. I couldn't answer. Her eyes stayed on mine. For one suspended second, neither of us seemed to remember where we were. Then she lowered her hand. And I walked away before either of us could make the mistake we had both been pretending not to imagine. 3 days later, I found Marian sitting alone on a bench behind the community garden. I almost kept walking. Then she looked up. "You're avoiding me." I stopped. "So are you." She gave a tired little smile. "Fair." The garden was mostly empty. A few people were watering plants near the far fence, and somewhere behind us, a lawn mower started and stopped. I sat at the opposite end of the bench. For a while, neither of us said anything. She had brought coffee in a paper cup. I noticed it was black. "You remembered." She looked at the cup. "You always drink it black." I didn't know you noticed. I notice more than I should. The words sat between us. She looked down at her hands. "I've been trying to figure out what to do." "With what?" She gave me a look. "You know." I did. I just didn't want to say it first. She took a slow breath. "You're Daniel's friend." "I know." "And I'm 47. I know. And there are probably 100 reasons this is a bad idea." I stared at the ground. "Probably." She laughed once, but there wasn't much humor in it. "You make that sound very convincing." I don't know what I'm supposed to say. Neither do I. A long silence followed. Then she said, "I don't want you to think I was playing with you." I looked at her. "I never thought that." "Good." She folded the paper sleeve around her coffee cup. Then unfolded it. Then folded it again. "I was lonely," she said. I waited. After the divorce, I got very good at pretending I wasn't. Her voice didn't shake. That somehow made it harder to hear. "I filled the house with things, new furniture, plants, books I never opened." She paused. "People kept telling me I looked fine." She looked at me. "You were the first person who never asked." I didn't know what to do with that. I wasn't trying to. "I know." She looked away. "I started waiting for you to come over." My chest tightened. She continued before I could answer. "Not because of anything you said. You just sit there, drink tea, argue with Daniel about stupid things." A small smile appeared. I liked that. I looked at her hands. I liked being there. Her fingers stopped moving. "I know." That was the dangerous part. We both knew. She turned toward me. What happens if we stop pretending this is nothing? I looked at her. I don't know. And if Daniel finds out? I don't know. And if you wake up one morning and realize you wanted something different? I swallowed. I don't know. She gave a quiet, almost helpless laugh. You really don't know anything. Not about this. She looked at me for a long time. Then she leaned slightly closer. Not enough. Just enough. Her eyes dropped briefly to my mouth before returning to my eyes. I stopped breathing. She whispered, "Tell me to stop." I could have. I should have. Instead, I asked the only thing I could think of. What if I don't? Her face changed. And for one suspended second, the whole world seemed to wait for her answer. She didn't answer. Not that night. She looked at me for another second, then stood. I think you should go. I stayed seated. Marion. Please. There was something different in her voice. Not anger. Not fear exactly. Something heavier. I got up. She walked me to the door without looking at me. Good night. Good night. The door closed. I sat in my car for almost 20 minutes before starting the engine. The next morning, there was a message from her. I'm sorry, yesterday shouldn't have happened. I read it 3 times. Then another message arrived. Please don't come by for a while. I typed okay. Deleted it. Typed, did I do something wrong? Deleted that too. Eventually, I sent nothing. For the next 2 weeks, I stayed away. Daniel noticed before Marion did. You haven't been around lately. Been busy. With what? Work. He looked at me. You hate your job. I know. He laughed. I laughed too. The conversation moved on. That was the strange thing about friendship. Sometimes you could lie with 3 words and still keep talking about dinner. Then, one Saturday, Daniel mentioned something I wasn't prepared for. Mom's selling the house. I stopped eating. What? Yeah, she's been thinking about it for months. Why? He shrugged. Too many memories, I guess. I put my fork down. When? Soon. I didn't ask anything else. That night, I drove past her street. I told myself I was only taking the longer way home. Her porch was dark. The curtains were open. I could see boxes stacked near the window. I kept driving. 3 days later, I received another message. I should have told you earlier. I stared at the screen. Then, my ex has been asking me to move closer to our daughter. I knew she had a daughter. I hadn't known she was still involved in Marion's decisions. Another message came. Nothing happened between us. I just need to figure out what my life is supposed to look like now. I leaned back against the kitchen counter. The room suddenly felt too small. I wanted to ask whether I was part of that life. I wanted to ask whether she had ever meant what she said on the bench. Instead, I typed, I understand. This time, I sent it. Her reply came almost immediately. Do you? I stared at those 2 words. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I typed, asterisk no, but I'm trying. I didn't send it. I saved it in the draft folder and put the phone face down. A week passed. Then Daniel invited me over to help carry boxes. I almost refused. Instead, I went. Marion wasn't there. Her absence filled every room. I carried books from the upstairs hallway while Daniel talked about his new apartment. At one point, I walked past the kitchen. The chair where I'd once sat with her was still there. 2 mugs sat on the counter. One was hers. The other was mine. I stood there longer than I should have. Then Daniel called from upstairs. Hey, you coming? Yeah. I looked back once. The empty chair didn't move. Neither did I. That night, I opened our message thread again. The unsent words were still there. If you asked me to stay, I would. I read them. Then I locked the phone. For the first time, I understood that silence could be a decision too. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life had forgotten to finish the sentence. I found out Marion was leaving on a Thursday. Daniel told me over coffee, like he was mentioning the weather. She's moving next month. I nodded. Where? Closer to my sister, somewhere quieter. I looked down at my cup. Good for her. The words sounded wrong. Daniel didn't notice. That evening, I drove to her house. For once, I didn't sit in the car. I walked to the door and knocked. Marion opened it. She looked surprised. Not unhappy. Just surprised. I thought you might come. I almost didn't. She stepped aside. The house was half empty. Boxes lined the hallway. The kitchen table had been pushed against the wall, and only one chair remained. I looked at it. She noticed. Some things are still packed. Yeah. Neither of us smiled. She put the kettle on. You still drink black coffee? Still. She nodded. A few minutes later, we sat in the kitchen with 2 cups between us. The silence wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't unbearable either. I took my phone from my pocket. I wrote something to you. She looked at me. I didn't send it. Why? Because I was scared. She waited. I looked at the table. I kept thinking if I said the wrong thing, I'd lose you completely. Her fingers tightened around her mug. You were never supposed to lose me. That wasn't how it felt. She looked away. I know. I swallowed. I didn't need you to promise me anything. I just needed to know whether what happened between us was real. Her eyes lifted. It was. 2 words. Nothing dramatic. Still, I felt my shoulders loosen. She continued quietly. I tried to make it disappear because I thought that was the responsible thing. Was it? She gave a small, tired smile. I don't know anymore. The kettle clicked as it cooled behind us. I looked at her. I care about you. She didn't answer immediately. Then she reached across the table. Her fingers rested lightly over mine. I care about you too. We stayed like that. No promises. No plans. Just her hand over mine. After a while, she pulled it back. You're Daniel's friend. I know. And I'm still his mother. I know. And you're still 24. I smiled faintly. You've mentioned that. She laughed under her breath. I'm serious. So am I. She looked down. I don't want you waiting for me. I won't. She nodded. Then she asked, would you? I understood what she meant. I shook my head. Not like that. Something in her expression softened. Good. She stood and walked me to the door. Outside, the evening air was cool. I turned toward her. So that's it. She looked at me. I don't know. For once, I didn't need a better answer. She reached up and straightened the collar of my jacket, the same small gesture she'd made weeks ago. Then she smiled. Not the careful smile she'd been wearing lately. The real one. Take care of yourself. You too. I started walking. Hey. I turned. She stood in the doorway. Thank you for coming back. I nodded. Okay. She smiled. Okay. And somehow, that was enough for one night. 6 months passed before I saw Marion again. Not because we stopped caring. Because we had finally learned that caring wasn't the same thing as rushing. She moved closer to her daughter. I stayed in the city, changed jobs, and stopped checking my phone every 5 minutes. Daniel and I remained friends. That part surprised me. Maybe friendship survives more things than people give it credit for, especially when nobody tries to turn a complicated truth into a simple one. Marian and I talked occasionally. Nothing dramatic. A message about a book. A photograph of a terrible cup of coffee. Once, she sent me a picture of a garden bench and wrote, "Looks familiar." I stared at it for a while before replying. "Needs better coffee." She sent back a laughing emoji. It was enough. Then, one Saturday morning, she came back to the city. She asked if I wanted to meet. We chose the same community garden. The bench was still there. I arrived at 8:47 a.m. She was already sitting down. "You're early," she said. "I'm exactly on time." "You're 7 minutes early." "You remember." I remember everything. She was different. Not dramatically. Just lighter. Her hair was shorter. She had a small crease near one eye that hadn't been there before, or maybe I simply hadn't noticed it. I sat beside her. For a while, we watched an old man struggle with a garden hose. "You look happier," I said. She glanced at me. "So do you." "I got better at sleeping." "That's a very romantic achievement." I laughed. There it was again. That easy quietness we'd somehow found after all the awkwardness. She told me about her daughter. The new apartment, the small garden she'd started growing. I told her about my job. Neither of us pretended those months hadn't happened. Eventually, she looked at me. "I missed you." I looked down at my hands. "I missed you too." She nodded. No performance. No hesitation. Then she said, "I don't want us to keep calling this something we're not allowed to name." I looked at her. "What do you want to call it?" She smiled. "Love." The word was almost ordinary in her mouth. That made it feel real. I took her hand. She let me. We didn't kiss. Not there. Not then. We just sat together, while the garden slowly became louder around us. A few weeks later, she moved back to the city. Not into my apartment. Not into some perfect life. She rented a small place 10 minutes away. We started having dinner together on Thursdays. Sometimes she cooked. Sometimes I did. Sometimes we ordered food because neither of us wanted to wash dishes. Daniel eventually found out. There was an uncomfortable conversation. Then another. It wasn't easy. But nobody disappeared. Nobody slammed a door. Life simply became more honest. One evening, Marian stood in my kitchen making tea. She looked over her shoulder. "You know what I keep thinking about?" "What?" "The first time I told you to make yourself at home." I smiled. That was terrible advice. She laughed. "Probably." I walked over and leaned against the counter. She handed me my mug. Black coffee. Exactly how I liked it. Then she touched my hand. Just briefly. The same small gesture. Only this time, neither of us pulled away. We had spent months thinking love would require some enormous decision. It didn't. It required hundreds of small ones. Showing up. Telling the truth. Waiting when waiting was necessary. And staying when staying finally became possible. Sometimes, I still think about that first message. This stays between us. It didn't. Not really. What stayed between us was the quiet understanding that began when neither of us knew what to say. And even now, when the coffee goes cold and the kitchen gets too quiet, Marian looks at me and smiles like she remembers exactly where we started. I always smile back. Because some things don't need to be explained twice. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?